Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights and let our minds drift back to a world profoundly different from our own. A time when life was raw, brutal, and utterly unforgiving. We're journeying to an era where the comfort of modern medicine was an unimaginable dream, and every sniffle, every cut, every minor ache could escalate into a terrifying fight for survival. Tonight, we're going to explore what being sick was like for you. During the Viking Age, you might think of Vikings as mighty warriors, sailing longships and conquering lands, but even the strongest among them faced an invisible enemy far more relentless than any sword or axe. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in for tonight's journey, feel free to drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Whether that's a quiet evening in a peaceful home in Boise, Idaho, or the early morning hours in a bustling apartment in Boston, Massachusetts. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine yourself. Now, a young Norse settler named Bjorn, living in a small, windswept longhouse, nestled by a fjord in what would now be, let's say, the wild coastal reaches of modern-day Maine. Around the year 900 CE, you're perhaps 10 years old, a time when most kids in a place like Portland, Oregon, are worried about school projects or soccer practice. But for you, Bjorn, your days are not filled with such concerns. Instead, your life is dominated by the constant, raw reality of survival and the ever-present understanding that the world around you is truly a harsh world, where the unyielding rule is the survival of the fittest. From the moment you wake, the cold bites at your exposed skin. Your longhouse, while offering shelter, is smoky and damp, warmed only by the central hearth. The air outside carries the scent of salt and pine, but also the damp chill of the North Atlantic. You're always a little hungry, even after breakfast, which consists of little more than a thin gruel. Your clothes are wool and linen, practical but coarse, never truly warm enough when the winter winds howl. There are no paved roads, no clean water piped directly into your home, no soft mattresses or insulated walls. Every daily task is a physical exertion: chopping wood, hauling water from the stream, tending to the few livestock, helping your mother with weaving or preparing hides. Your body is constantly working, constantly exposed. You see it in the adults around you. Your father, a strong man, bears scars from old wounds, some from raiding, some from accidents with an axe or a fishing net. Your mother's hands are calloused, her back often aching from endless labor. Your grandmother moves slowly, her joints stiff and swollen from years of hard work and cold. You've already seen several younger siblings succumb to the coughing sickness or the belly ache that sweeps through the settlement. When someone falls ill, there's no doctor to call, no medicine cabinet to raid. There's just the community, their collective knowledge of herbs and old wives' tales, and the grim recognition that if the sickness is strong, or if the injured body cannot heal itself, then weird fate has likely claimed another. The environment itself is a constant challenge: bitter winters that bring frostbite and lung-chilling coughs, damp summers that breed swarms of biting insects and festering sores. Every scrape, every splinter, every feverish chill is a potential death sentence. This isn't a world of comfort. It's a world of raw, unfiltered physical existence, where your body is your most vital tool for survival, and its vulnerability is a constant, terrifying truth. This is the unyielding, relentless truth of a harsh world, where the very fabric of daily life was dictated by the survival of the fittest, transforming existence into a perpetual, instinctual battle against an environment that offered little comfort and much peril. It's like living in a permanent, high-stakes wilderness survival game, where one wrong move, one bad twist of fate, can mean your end. It truly sucked to live in a world where your body was constantly battling unseen forces. With no modern safety nets, the Viking Age, spanning roughly from the late 8th to the mid-11th century, was a period characterized by remarkable maritime expansion, exploration, and cultural exchange. However, for the individuals living within this era, life was inherently challenging and dangerous, defined by a harsh world where only the most resilient had a chance at survival of the fittest. This fundamental reality profoundly impacted how illness was experienced and understood. Several overarching characteristics of the Viking Age contributed to this challenging environment. Geographic factors. Many Norse settlements were in northern latitudes: Scandinavia, Iceland, Greenland, parts of North America, characterized by long, cold winters and short growing seasons. This meant periods of food scarcity, harsh weather, and limited resources. Subsistence economy life was primarily agrarian, supplemented by fishing, hunting, and trade. This meant physically demanding labor, exposure to the elements, and reliance on the natural world for sustenance. Crop failures or poor hunting seasons could quickly lead to widespread hunger and weakened immune systems. Limited technology for housing, clothing, and food preservation was rudimentary. Longhouses, while communal, were often smoky, damp, and lacked modern sanitation. Clothing was basic, and there was no refrigeration, leading to challenges with food spoilage. Constant exposure, whether farming, fishing, sailing, or raiding. Vikings were constantly exposed to the elements, to physical exertion, and to the risk of injury. This constant exposure naturally led to a higher incidence of illness and physical trauma, absence of modern medicine. Concepts of germ theory, antibiotics, advanced surgical techniques, or sterile environments were centuries away. This meant even minor infections could be fatal, and serious injuries were often untreatable. Common historical truth is that the Viking Age presented a harsh world where the survival of the fittest was a daily reality, particularly concerning health due to environmental challenges, a subsistence economy, limited technology, and the complete absence of modern medical understanding or interventions. This unforgiving context shaped every aspect of how individuals experienced illness and injury, making even minor ailments potentially life-threatening. Historians still widely debate the precise mortality rates for various diseases during the Viking Age due to the scarcity of direct medical records, relying heavily on archaeological evidence and comparative studies of pre-modern societies. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about a harsh world. Survival of the fittest is the curious phenomenon of bog bodies. Remarkably preserved human remains found in peat bogs across northern Europe, often showing signs of violence, ritual sacrifice, or severe chronic illness and injury prior to their deaths, offering a chillingly direct, yet often enigmatic, glimpse into the brutal realities of Viking-era health and mortality, hinting at untold stories of suffering and the desperate measures or fates that befell individuals in such an unforgiving landscape. Imagine young Bjorn, hearing hushed tales of someone found in the local bog, a body preserved by the dark, cold water. A stark, visceral reminder that the land itself held secrets of the suffering that came before. A chilling and silent testament to the impermanence of life in this harsh world. It's like finding perfectly preserved crime scene photos from 1,000 years ago. But the crime was simply living and dying in a brutal environment. It truly sucked to have the very ground you walked on occasionally give up perfectly preserved, tragic examples of the hard lives and violent ends of your ancestors. The specific characteristics of this harsh world and its impact on survival of the fittest were pervasive. Climate extremes, from the bitter, dark winters with heavy snow and ice to the damp, cool summers. The climate itself was a constant assault on the body. Frostbite, hypothermia, and respiratory infections were common, especially among the vulnerable. Poor housing conditions. Longhouses, though communal and offering some warmth from the central fire, were often smoky due to poor ventilation, leading to chronic lung issues. They were also prone to dampness, which encouraged mold and mildew, and were shared with animals, contributing to disease transmission. Limited diet. While Vikings had varied diets based on local resources, meat, fish, grains, some vegetables. These diets could be highly seasonal and often lacked crucial vitamins and minerals, especially during long winters. Scurvy, anemia, and other deficiency diseases were likely common. The reliance on preserved foods, often heavily salted or dried, also had its own health implications. Lack of sanitation. There was little understanding of hygiene or sanitation. Waste was often disposed of near dwellings. Water sources could be contaminated, and personal cleanliness was rudimentary. This created ideal conditions for the spread of bacterial and parasitic infections. Imagine the stench from the Nighttime series, where we discuss the filth and disease in medieval cities that accompanied basic living. A constant assault on the senses and a breeding ground for illness. Physical demands of labor. Daily life involved intense physical labor. Farming, building, smithing, sailing, and raiding were all strenuous activities that led to sprains, fractures, cuts, and repetitive strain injuries. There was no concept of ergonomics or workplace safety, animal-borne diseases. Living in close proximity to livestock meant constant exposure to animal-borne diseases, zoonoses. Diseases like tuberculosis from cattle, brucellosis, or various parasites could easily jump from animals to humans, adding another layer of unseen threat, violence and warfare. The Viking Age was also an era of conflict. Raiding, interclan feuds, and larger-scale military campaigns meant a constant risk of violent injury, sword cuts, axe wounds, spear punctures, and blunt force trauma. These injuries, even if not immediately fatal, often became infected and led to agonizing deaths. Limited medical knowledge and tools. Healing was based on practical experience, inherited wisdom, and superstitious beliefs. There were no sterile instruments, no understanding of internal medicine, and limited effective treatments for serious ailments. Even rudimentary surgical procedures like setting broken bones or amputations were done without anesthesia and carried immense risks of infection. This meant that the body's own ability to heal was paramount, high infant and child mortality. This harsh world was particularly brutal for the youngest. High rates of infant and child mortality were the norm, with many children succumbing to common infections, malnutrition, or birth complications before reaching adulthood. Surviving childhood was itself a testament to resilience and perhaps a bit of luck. In essence, living in the Viking Age was a constant negotiation with a precarious environment. Your body was both your greatest asset and your most vulnerable point. Every day was a testament to the fact that you were alive, a constant battle against the seen and unseen forces that sought to bring you down. The very air you breathed, the water you drank, the food you ate, and the activities you engaged in, all carried inherent risks to your health. This was not a world for the faint of heart or the frail of body. It was a world where resilience was not just a virtue, but a fundamental requirement for survival of the fittest. For young Bjorn, growing up in this world meant learning early on that life was fleeting, and the body, however strong, was always on borrowed time. A stark contrast to the modern comforts and medical safety nets enjoyed by people today. Whether they're living in the bustling urban centers of New York City, New York, or the quiet farmlands of Iowa, let's gently return from the stark reality of a harsh world. That unyielding environment where only the most resilient could truly achieve the survival of the fittest. If we've just explored the broad challenges of the Viking Age, tonight we'll zoom in closer, exploring the daily, insidious threats that lurked in every corner, everyday ills, common ailments. You might imagine grand battles and epic journeys, but for your medieval ancestor, the most frequent dangers often came from a simple cut, a persistent cough or sudden fever, turning seemingly minor discomforts into potentially fatal struggles. Imagine yourself now, our young Bjorn, perhaps a few years older, 13 or 14, living still in that windswept settlement in what would now be coastal Maine. You've become more accustomed to the bite of the cold, the constant physical labor, and the ever-present understanding that life is precarious. You're strong for your age, capable with an axe, and your hands are calloused from working the land and helping with the longship. But even your youthful vigor doesn't protect you from the relentless onslaught of everyday ills. Those common ailments that afflict every man, woman, and child in your village. It begins subtly. Perhaps a small cut on your hand from an errant axe swing while chopping firewood. In a modern American home in, say, San Diego, California, you'd clean it with soap and water, maybe put on an antibiotic ointment and a bandage, and forget about it. But here, there's no sterile soap, no antiseptic. You might rinse it in cold stream water, or your mother might press a poultice of chewed herbs onto it. For a day or two, it's just a minor inconvenience. Then the edges begin to redden. A throbbing pain starts, a dull ache that grows steadily. Red streaks appear, creeping up your arm. Soon, your hand is swollen, hot to the touch, and you feel a fever begin to creep into your bones. The headache sets in, a pounding behind your eyes. Your mother murmurs about blood poisoning, a dark, unseen enemy taking hold. You shiver even under heavy furs. Or perhaps it's the hacking cough that sweeps through the longhouse every winter. It starts as a tickle in your throat, then becomes a persistent, rattling cough that keeps you awake at night. Your chest feels heavy, your breathing labored. The old ones in the village shake their heads, remembering others who started with such a cough and never recovered. There's no cough syrup, no antibiotics. You drink warm herbal teas, inhale the smoke from burning juniper. But the cough persists, sapping your strength, turning your vibrant young body into a weary, feverish shell. Every single day brings its own micro-dangers: a sprained ankle from a fall on icy ground, a festering toothache that throbs relentlessly, a persistent rash from an unknown plant, or simply the gnawing discomfort of parasites in your gut. These aren't the dramatic injuries of battle, but the insidious, relentless attacks on your well-being, turning routine discomforts into potentially life-ending threats because of the complete absence of effective treatment. This is the quiet, yet pervasive, truth of everyday ills, where common ailments became serious dangers, transforming minor discomforts into potentially fatal struggles for survival. A constant reminder that life in this era was a ceaseless, microscopic battle. It's like living in a world where every single paper cut could turn into a flesh-eating disease, and every cold could be pneumonia. It truly sucked to know that the smallest inconvenience could swiftly escalate into a life-threatening crisis. During the Viking Age, while dramatic events like battles and long voyages often capture our imagination, the daily reality for most individuals was a constant struggle against everyday ills and common ailments. These seemingly minor health issues posed significant threats due to the prevailing environmental conditions, lifestyle, and, critically, the complete lack of modern medical understanding or interventions. The prevalence and severity of common ailments were influenced by poor sanitation. Limited understanding of hygiene meant that waste disposal was rudimentary. Water sources could be easily contaminated, and living spaces were often uncleaned, leading to high rates of bacterial and parasitic infections. Lack of germ theory. Without any concept of microorganisms, the importance of cleanliness in preventing infection was unknown. Wounds were not properly disinfected, and food preparation often led to contamination. Nutritional deficiencies diets were often seasonal and could lack essential vitamins and minerals, especially during long winters, weakening immune systems and making individuals more susceptible to illness. Exposure to elements. Constant exposure to cold, dampness, and heat, whether through farming, fishing, or sailing, contributed to respiratory illnesses, skin conditions, and joint problems. Physically demanding lifestyles. The heavy labor involved in daily life led to frequent injuries such as sprains, fractures, cuts, and repetitive strain. These injuries, even if minor, were prone to infection. Common historical truth is that everyday ills and common ailments during the Viking Age were far more dangerous than their modern counterparts, frequently escalating into life-threatening conditions due to a lack of sanitation, understanding of germ theory, and effective medical treatments. These persistent low-level health challenges exacted a significant cumulative toll on the population, impacting daily life and overall mortality rates. Historians still widely debate the precise impact of specific environmental factors, such as regional dietary variations or specific microbial strains, on the prevalence and severity of different common ailments across various Viking settlements. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about everyday ills, common ailments is the curious phenomenon of hair analysis found in some archaeological studies of Viking-era remains, where chemical analysis of ancient hair samples has revealed traces of heavy metals like lead and mercury, suggesting exposure not just from natural sources, but potentially from rudimentary industrial activities like smelting ores or even desperate attempts at self-medication using toxic mineral compounds as perceived remedies, adding an insidious, invisible layer to the everyday health challenges faced by Vikings. Imagine young Bjorn feeling that familiar headache, wondering if it's the smoke, the cold, or some unseen poison seeping into his very bones. A silent killer disguised by the everyday struggle for survival. It's like having a constant low-grade poisoning from the very air you breathe, without ever knowing why you feel so unwell. It truly sucked to have your body unknowingly accumulate toxic substances just by going about your daily life. The specific insidious ways everyday ills became grave dangers, and how common ailments turned fatal, were numerous. Infections from minor wounds. A simple cut, scrape, or puncture wound from thorns. Tools, or even splinters from a longship was a prime entry point for bacteria. Without knowledge of sterilization or antibiotics, these minor injuries quickly festered, leading to cellulitis, abscesses, and ultimately sepsis blood poisoning. The progression was rapid and often agonizing, as the infection spread through the body, causing fevers, chills, and organ failure. The filth and disease we discussed in previous chapters would be ever present. Respiratory infections. The cold, damp climate, smoky longhouses, and close living quarters were ideal breeding grounds for respiratory illnesses. Common colds and coughs could easily escalate into bronchitis, pneumonia, or tuberculosis. These were often debilitating, lingering for weeks or months, and frequently fatal, especially for the very young, the elderly, or those already weakened by malnutrition. The constant coughing would wear a person down, leading to extreme fatigue and making them even more susceptible. Gastrointestinal illnesses. The belly ache. Contaminated food and water were rampant. Lack of proper waste disposal, unclean hands during food preparation, and the spoilage of preserved foods meant a constant threat of bacterial infections like dysentery or salmonella and parasitic infestations. These caused severe vomiting, diarrhea, dehydration, and intense abdominal pain, quickly proving fatal, especially for children who could dehydrate rapidly. Even common parasitic worms could sap vital nutrients, contributing to chronic weakness and anemia. Dental issues. Poor diet, often coarse grains, little fresh fruit like vegetables, and a complete absence of dental hygiene led to rampant tooth decay, abscesses, and gum disease. A severe tooth infection could cause excruciating pain, lead to widespread infection in the jaw or brain, and, without extraction tools or antibiotics, often resulted in death. Imagine the constant, throbbing pain, making it impossible to eat or sleep. It was truly a low-grade torture. Skin infections, constant exposure to the elements, insect bites, minor abrasions, and poor hygiene meant skin infections like impetigo, boils, and fungal infections were widespread. While not immediately fatal, these could become chronic, weaken the body, or lead to more serious secondary infections if left untreated. Joint and bone ailments. The physically demanding life led to widespread arthritis, particularly in the knees, hips, and spine. Repetitive strain from farming, rowing, or crafting would cause chronic pain and reduced mobility, severely impacting an individual's ability to contribute to their household or community, effectively making them a burden. Fractures from falls or accidents, if not set properly, could lead to permanent disability or fatal infection. Nutritional deficiencies. Beyond general hunger from the harsh world, specific vitamin deficiencies were common. Scurvy, caused by lack of vitamin C found in fresh fruits and vegetables, was a particular threat during long sea voyages or prolonged winters when fresh produce was scarce. Symptoms included bleeding gums, weakness, and open sores, leading to severe debilitation and death. Anemia, from lack of iron, was also widespread, causing chronic fatigue and making individuals more susceptible to other illnesses. Unseen diseases, viruses, and other pathogens, of course, existed. While we can't definitively diagnose them from archaeological records, common viral infections like influenza, measles, and mumps would have swept through communities, leaving widespread sickness and mortality in their wake, indistinguishable to the Vikings from any other fever or coughing sickness. In a world without antibiotics, antiseptics, or even basic understanding of hygiene, the human body was a remarkably vulnerable machine. Every minor cut was a potential gateway for deadly bacteria, every cough a possible harbinger of consumption, and every upset stomach a precursor to fatal dehydration. The good health of a Viking was not an absence of ailments, but a constant battle against them. A precarious balance maintained by inherent resilience, a bit of luck, and the body's own, often overwhelmed. Healing mechanisms. For Bjorn, growing up meant learning to ignore chronic aches, to suppress a cough, and to hope that the simple warmth of the fire, or a mother's herbal poultice, would be enough to ward off the tiny, invisible armies constantly besieging his very existence. This constant low-level suffering, far more common than any heroic battle, was perhaps the most brutal truth of everyday life in the Viking Age. A grim reminder of how much we take for granted in our medically advanced lives. Whether we're getting a simple checkup in a modern clinic in Dallas, Texas, or recovering from a common cold in a comfortable home in Phoenix, Arizona, let's gently return from the pervasive reality of everyday ills. Those common ailments that could so quickly escalate into life-threatening crises in the Viking Age. If we've just explored the constant, microscopic threats, tonight we'll delve into something far more terrifying and overwhelming mysterious plagues. Divine wrath or fates. You might imagine a world where illness was understood scientifically. But for your medieval ancestor, widespread epidemics were inexplicable catastrophes, viewed as supernatural punishments or inevitable decrees from the gods, driving communities to desperate, often futile acts of appeasement or flight. Imagine yourself. Now, our scholar, Leeway. Wait, no, that's not right. We're in the Viking Age, aren't we? Let's try again. Imagine yourself. Now, our resilient Bjorn. Now a young adult of perhaps 25 winters, living in that bustling, albeit still windswept, settlement in what would now be a remote, fjord-laden part of British Columbia. Canada. You've survived the harsh world Chapter 1 and countless everyday ills Chapter 2, growing strong and resourceful. You understand the rhythms of the seasons, the feel of a good axe in your hand, and the subtle signs of a healthy cow. But then a new kind of terror descends, one that defies all logic, all experience, all understanding. This is the horror of mysterious plagues, seen as nothing less than divine wrath or fates. It begins in the nearby settlements, whispers carried by traders or travelers. A sudden, terrible sickness, striking down young and old alike with alarming speed. People are dying with swollen glands in their armpits and groins, their skin turning dark, a terrifying cough racking their bodies, sometimes spitting blood. There's no pattern to it, no discernible cause. Healthy men, strong women, vibrant children all succumb within days, sometimes hours. Panic grips your own community. Your mother, who has seen so many lesser ailments, looks at you with fear in her eyes, a fear you've rarely seen before. She clutches an old amulet, murmuring prayers to Odin and Freya, imploring them for mercy. The village Volva, the wise woman, enters a trance. Speaking of ancient curses of displeased gods, of ill omens brought by foreign ships, some try to reason to isolate the sick, but it seems to spread like wildfire, a chilling, invisible miasma. Others flee, abandoning their homes, hoping to outrun the unseen hand of death, but often carrying the disease with them to new, unsuspecting places. Spreading the filth and disease recall the widespread lack of sanitation from our earlier discussions further afield. As the sickness reaches your longhouse, you watch, helpless, as your neighbor, a strong farmer, succumbs in a single agonizing night. Then, your younger sister, vibrant just yesterday, begins to cough. You perform desperate rituals, offering sacrifices of grain and even a prized goat to the gods, hoping to appease their unseen anger. You listen to the desperate prayers, the keening laments for the dead, the chilling silence of houses where entire families have vanished. There's no scientific explanation, no treatment, no hope beyond the capricious will of the divine. This is the overwhelming, terrifying truth of mysterious plagues, interpreted as divine wrath or fates, transforming widespread disease into an unfathomable, supernatural terror that shattered communities and left survivors grappling with existential questions of punishment and predestination. It's like watching an invisible, omnipotent entity slowly pick off everyone you know. And the only explanation is that you've somehow angered the universe itself. It truly sucked to face mass death with no understanding, only fear and desperate, often futile. Spiritual pleas, widespread epidemics, or mysterious plagues, were among the most terrifying and destructive forces in the Viking Age. Lacking any scientific understanding of contagion or microbiology, these devastating outbreaks were almost universally attributed to supernatural causes, viewed as manifestations of divine wrath or fates. This profound lack of comprehension made these events even more psychologically harrowing, leading to desperate and often irrational responses. The interpretation of plagues as supernatural phenomena was rooted in animistic and polytheistic beliefs. Norse religion was rich with gods, spirits, and mythical beings who influenced the natural world. Illness was often seen as the work of malevolent spirits, curses, or the direct intervention of deities. Lack of observable cause. Unlike injuries or common illnesses which had tangible origins, a cut exposure to cold. The rapid spread and high mortality of plagues defied visible explanation. This made supernatural explanations highly compelling. Emphasis on word fate. The Norse concept of word emphasized an unalterable fate. Plagues, with their seemingly arbitrary victims, fit into this fatalistic worldview, suggesting that those who died were simply fated to do so. Limited scientific inquiry. While Vikings were skilled navigators and craftsmen, their intellectual framework did not include systematic scientific inquiry into the causes of disease. Observations were made, but theories remained tied to the spiritual realm. Common historical truth is that during the Viking Age, widespread outbreaks of mysterious plagues were generally incomprehensible to affected communities, leading them to interpret these devastating events as manifestations of divine wrath or fates rather than natural phenomena. This lack of scientific understanding fueled intense fear, spiritual appeasement, and often desperate, disorganized responses that could inadvertently exacerbate the spread of disease. Historians still widely debate the precise identities of many historical Viking Age plagues, whether specific outbreaks were early forms of the bubonic plague, smallpox, or other now eradicated diseases due to the limited and often metaphorical descriptions in contemporary sagas and archaeological records. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about mysterious plagues. Divine wrath or fates is the curious phenomenon of healing groves or sacred springs often associated with specific deities like Freyr or goddesses of fertility, which would become desperate pilgrimage sites during times of plague, with the sick or their families leaving offerings, tying cloth strips to trees, or attempting ritualistic bathing in freezing waters, hoping to appease the angered gods or extract healing blessings, highlighting the profound blend of fear, spiritual devotion, and utter helplessness in the face of incomprehensible mass death. Imagine young Bjorn having led his feverish sister to such a spring. The bitter cold water a stark contrast to her burning skin. The desperate hope in his mother's eyes as she whispered an ancient prayer. A poignant image of human vulnerability and unwavering faith in the face of an invisible killer. It's like a medieval version of a desperate prayer vigil. But instead of just prayer, you're literally dunking your dying loved one in an ice-cold puddle, hoping for a miracle. It truly sucked to have your only recourse against a deadly epidemic be acts of profound, often physically punishing, spiritual supplication. The overwhelming impact of mysterious plagues and their interpretation as divine wrath or fates manifested in several terrifying ways. Mass casualties. The most immediate and devastating impact was the sheer number of deaths. Without immunity, entire communities could be decimated. A single longhouse might lose half its inhabitants within days. These sudden, concentrated deaths were profoundly traumatizing and beyond anything most people had ever witnessed. The common ailments of Chapter 2 might be dangerous, but they rarely wiped out entire families in a blink. Rapid spread trade routes, raiding expeditions, and seasonal migrations meant that diseases could spread rapidly across vast distances. A long ship that brought valuable goods might unknowingly bring a deadly plague, turning a voyage of prosperity into an agent of destruction. The harsh world of travel now became a vector of death, psychological terror, and panic. The inexplicability and high mortality rate of plagues induced widespread panic and terror. Fear permeated daily life, fostering a sense of helplessness and fatalism. People watched their loved ones sicken and die with no understanding of why or how to stop it, leading to extreme psychological distress. Social disintegration. In severe outbreaks, the social fabric of communities could unravel. People might abandon the sick, leaving them to die alone. Essential services like farming, burial rites, and trade could cease, leading to further hardship and starvation among the survivors. Fear could override communal bonds, causing people to turn away from the very support structures that usually defined Viking society. Religious and superstitious responses. Faced with incomprehensible death, communities turned to intense religious and superstitious practices. This included sacrifices, offering valuable animals, goods, or even in rare and desperate instances, human sacrifices to appease angry gods or spirits, rituals performing specific chants, dances, or ceremonial acts believed to ward off evil spirits or draw protective blessings, omens and prophecies, consulting vulvas, wise women, or shamans for interpretations of omens or prophecies regarding the plague's origin and potential end, fleeing. While sometimes a pragmatic response to avoid infection, fleeing was also driven by the belief that one could escape the unlucky or cursed areas, often leading to unintended spread, blame, and scapegoating. In their desperation, communities might seek scapegoats, outsiders, marginalized individuals, or those perceived as having angered the gods might be blamed for bringing the plague, leading to violence or social ostracization. Economic disruption plagues severely disrupted economic activity. Labor forces were decimated, trade routes were abandoned, and crops might go unharvested. This led to food shortages, further weakening the survivors and potentially leading to localized famines. Long-term trauma. Survivors of a plague often carried deep psychological scars. They had witnessed unimaginable suffering and loss, which could lead to lingering fear, survivor's guilt, and a profound re-evaluation of their beliefs about fate and the gods. The memory of such an event could shape generations, becoming ingrained in the collective consciousness. Limited knowledge of contagion. Without the germ theory, people did not understand how diseases spread. They might wear amulets, pray, or offer sacrifices, but they wouldn't understand the importance of isolating the sick, burying the dead quickly, or purifying water sources. This ignorance inadvertently perpetuated the cycles of infection. Impact on leadership. The sudden deaths of community leaders, warriors, or skilled craftspeople could leave a devastating void, creating power vacuums and hindering effective responses to the crisis. Those who survived were often left to rebuild society from a much diminished base. For Bjorn, enduring a mysterious plague was the ultimate test of resilience. It was a time when the very fabric of his world seemed to tear apart, when the comforting rhythm of seasons and harvests was replaced by the terrifying, arbitrary hand of death. It was a period where the limits of human understanding were brutally exposed, forcing individuals to confront their deepest fears and to seek answers in the realm of the spiritual, for no other explanation was available. This experience of helplessness in the face of an unseen enemy, viewed as divine wrath or fates, was a profound and defining aspect of the Viking Age, a chilling reminder of how vulnerable humanity truly was before the dawn of modern medical science. Whether you're facing a new viral outbreak in a bustling city like Los Angeles, California, or navigating public health concerns in a quieter town in Vermont, let's gently return from the overwhelming terror of mysterious plagues, those incomprehensible devastations seen as nothing less than divine wrath or fates. If we've just explored the terrifying scale of widespread death, tonight we'll delve into the more intimate, yet equally desperate, attempts to combat illness healing hands, folk remedies and rituals. You might imagine sterile hospitals and precise prescriptions, but for your medieval ancestor, every attempt at cure was a blend of practical knowledge, ancient traditions, and fervent belief, offering what little comfort and hope could be found in a world without modern medicine. Imagine yourself now, our resilient Bjorn, older, perhaps in your 30s, a seasoned warrior and respected leader in your settlement in what we'll now call the rugged coast of Nova Scotia. Canada. You've seen your share of battle and survived a brush with the coughing sickness that plagued your village, a memory that still chills you to the bone, reminding you of the mysterious plagues from Chapter 3. You've also endured countless everyday ills, Chapter 2, and adapted to the harsh world, Chapter 1, since your childhood. But even with your strength, ailments persist. Today, it's not you, but your eldest son, little Finn, who is suffering. He awoke with a terrible fever, his skin burning, his breathing shallow, and a strange, painful swelling in his groin. He cries weakly, his small body racked with shivers. There's no doctor to call. Instead, your gaze turns to the Kona, the wise woman of your village, known for her healing hands, her knowledge of folk remedies and rituals. She arrives, her face etched with experience, carrying a small leather pouch filled with dried herbs, animal teeth, and polished stones. She examines Finn, her brow furrowed in concentration. She doesn't speak of scientific diagnoses, but of hot humors, of ill spirits, of a balance gone awry. She begins to prepare a concoction bark from a willow tree. You've seen her use it for fevers before, knowing nothing of its natural salicylates, mixed with honey and a dash of ground juniper berries. She brews it over the fire, the bitter steam filling the longhouse. While the brew cools, she begins a ritual. She chants softly, her voice a low hum, invoking the names of the gods, particularly Air, the Norse goddess associated with healing. She places warm, damp cloths infused with herbs on Finn's forehead and on the swollen area. She might lightly trace runes on his skin, ancient symbols believed to hold protective or curative power. You, your wife, and the rest of the family watch, helpless yet hopeful, clinging to every movement, every whispered word. This is not precise science. It's a desperate combination of observation, inherited wisdom passed down through generations of oral tradition, and profound faith. It's the best that anyone can do, a constant blend of the practical and the mystical, offering what little solace and chance of recovery exists in a world without modern medicine. This is the intimate yet profoundly limited truth of healing hands, where folk remedies and rituals became the primary means of combating illness, transforming the desperate search for health into a blend of practical knowledge, ancient traditions, and fervent, often unfulfilled belief. It's like having to build your own complicated medical kit from whatever you can forage in the woods, and then performing a magic spell over it, hoping for the best. It truly sucked to rely on intuition and tradition, with no real understanding of how disease actually worked. In the Viking Age, without the benefit of scientific understanding of disease, medical care was largely the domain of healing hands practicing folk remedies and rituals. These practices were deeply interwoven with their worldview, blending practical knowledge of herbs and basic anatomy with spiritual beliefs, omens, and the intervention of deities. The sources of these healing practices included oral tradition. Knowledge was passed down through generations, often within families or specific individuals designated as healers, observation and experimentation. Over centuries, people observed which plants had certain effects at giant pain relief, fever reduction, leading to a practical, albeit unscientific, understanding of herbal properties. Spiritual beliefs. Illness was frequently attributed to malevolent spirits, curses, or divine displeasure. Therefore, that healing often involved rituals, incantations, and appeals to gods like Odin, who mastered magic and runes. Freya associated with fertility and sometimes healing, or Era Valkyrie associated specifically with healing. Limited exchange of knowledge. While trade and travel were extensive, systematic medical education or widespread dissemination of medical texts did not exist in the same way as in contemporary, more centralized civilizations. Common historical truth is that during the Viking Age, healing practices relied heavily on folk remedies and rituals, incorporating a mix of traditional herbal knowledge, practical wound care, and spiritual elements to address illness and injury. These healing hands offered what comfort and limited efficacy was available in a world devoid of modern medical science, shaping a holistic yet rudimentary approach to health. Historians still widely debate the true efficacy of many specific Viking-era herbal remedies, with some showing potential pharmacological properties like willow bark for pain relief, while others were likely purely symbolic or ineffective. And the precise blend of practical skill versus spiritual belief varied greatly among individual healers. Some of a fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about healing hands. Folk remedies and rituals is the curious phenomenon of trepanning or trepanation, drilling holes in the skull, archaeological evidence of which has been found in some Viking-era graves, suggesting that this incredibly dangerous and painful procedure was sometimes performed likely to relieve pressure from head injuries, treat headaches, or perhaps even to release evil spirits, causing mental illness, a terrifying testament to the desperate and rudimentary surgical interventions occasionally attempted by Viking healers, often with fatal results. Imagine young Bjorn hearing hushed whispers of a man who suffered a head wound, and how the Kona had tried to open his skull to let the bad humors out. A chilling reminder of the raw, brutal limits of their medical expertise. It's like a medieval brain surgeon operating with a rusty hand drill, no anesthesia, and a prayer book. And a prayer? It truly sucked to have the most advanced surgical procedure of your time be something that literally drilled into your skull while you were awake. The myriad ways healing hands employed folk remedies and rituals were extensive, yet often limited in their effectiveness. Herbal lore. This was arguably the most practical aspect of Viking healing. Healers possessed vast knowledge of local flora and their purported medicinal properties. Common examples included willow bark used for pain relief and fever reduction due to salicin, the precursor to aspirin, nettles used for internal bleeding, joint pain, and as a general tonic, juniper berries' diuretic and antiseptic properties, used for urinary tract issues and digestive problems, chamomile mugwort used for calming, digestive upset, and sleep, plantain applied to wounds to reduce inflammation and promote healing, honey used as an antiseptic for wounds and for soothing coughs, wound care for injuries from everyday ills or battles. Healers would attempt to clean wounds often with water, sometimes wine or urine as crude antiseptics, stop bleeding with pressure or cautery using hot irons, and bind them with linen strips. Poultices made from mashed herbs like plantain, garlic, or a mixture of mosses were applied to prevent infection and promote healing, though often without true sterility. Amputations were performed for severely infected limbs, a brutal last resort with high mortality rates due to shock and infection. Bone-setting fractures were common, and healers would attempt to set broken bones using splints made of wood or bark, binding them tightly. While basic, this was an area where practical knowledge could genuinely aid recovery, though imperfectly set bones could lead to chronic pain and deformity. Bloodletting. Though perhaps less prevalent than in later medieval Europe, some evidence suggests bloodletting might have been practiced based on the ancient theory of humors, believing that illness was caused by an imbalance of bodily fluids. This could weaken an already sick individual. Incantations and charms. Alongside physical remedies, verbal charms, incantations galder, and runic inscriptions were believed to hold curative power. These would be recited over the sick, carved into amulets, or inscribed onto the objects used in healing rituals. The belief was that words themselves, especially ancient or sacred ones, they could influence health. Ritual baths and cleansing, special baths, often involving specific herbs or waters from sacred springs, were used to purify the sick, symbolically washing away disease or malevolent influences. These might also have practical benefits in terms of hygiene, though this wasn't understood. Animal parts and mineral use. Beyond herbs, various animal parts, bones, organs, blood and minerals like ochre or specific stones were incorporated into remedies, often based on sympathetic magic or perceived properties. As highlighted by the hair analysis phenomenon, some of these could be unknowingly toxic. Spiritual offerings and appeasement. When illness was attributed to divine wrath or malevolent spirits, especially during mysterious plagues, offerings would be made at temples, sacred trees, or altars to appease the gods, or rituals performed to banish spirits. These were acts of desperation and profound faith. The healer's role, Kona or Lekna, healers. Whether a village Kona wise woman or a Lekna, a more specialized, often male, healer, held respected positions. Their authority stemmed not just from their practical knowledge, but also from their perceived connection to the spiritual world. They often possessed charismatic personalities and a deep understanding of local folklore, providing psychological comfort as much as physical remedies, lack of anesthesia or antiseptics. Any procedure, from setting a bone to the extreme of tree panning, was performed without pain relief or sterile conditions. The suffering of the patient would have been immense, and the risk of fatal infection astronomical, despite the often rudimentary and superstitious nature of their practices. These healing hands were the only hope in a harsh world. They represented humanity's enduring struggle against sickness, a blend of observation, inherited wisdom, and fervent belief in the power of the unseen. For Bjorn and his family, watching the Kona work her magic over little Finn, there was no guarantee of success, no certainty of cure. There was only the desperate hope that her ancient knowledge and spiritual connection would be enough to turn the tide against the insidious forces threatening his son's young life. A poignant reminder of the preciousness of modern medical advances. Whether you're receiving cutting-edge treatment in a research hospital in Houston, Texas, or simply getting a routine checkup in a rural clinic in Oregon, let's gently return from the desperate, yet often profound, world of healing hands. Those folk remedies and rituals that were the primary defense against illness in the Viking Age. If we've just explored the blend of practical knowledge and spiritual belief, tonight we'll delve into the foundational, often crude, understanding of the human body itself, Viking medicine, runes and sagas. You might imagine detailed anatomical charts and complex physiological theories, but for your medieval ancestor, knowledge of the body was rudimentary, intertwined with spiritual forces, ancient wisdom, and the vivid, sometimes fantastical narratives passed down through generations. Imagine yourself, now, our seasoned Bjorn, perhaps in your mid-30s, respected for your strength and survival through the harsh world. Chapter 1. The Myriad Everyday Ills. Chapter 2. The Terrifying Mysterious Plagues. Chapter 3. and the desperate attempts at healing through folk remedies and rituals. Chapter 4. You've witnessed much suffering and even more resilience. You've seen what works and, more often, what doesn't. Your understanding of the human body isn't based on textbooks or dissections, but on observation of wounds, of sickness, of death, and the occasional miraculous recovery. This is the raw reality of Viking medicine, deeply rooted in the wisdom gleaned from runes and sagas. You are helping your neighbor, Thora, who has suffered a grievous injury. A heavy log slipped during construction, crushing her leg. The bone is clearly broken, and the flesh is torn. As the Lekna, the skilled healer, perhaps a man this time, as some specialized healers were, examines the injury, he doesn't speak of bones as individual structures named for their Latin roots, like a modern doctor in a bustling hospital in Los Angeles. California might. Instead, he speaks of the bone house, the flesh net, and the blood rivers within. His understanding of the body is functional, descriptive, drawn from generations of experience with combat wounds and accidental trauma. He knows where the major blood vessels are, how to staunch the flow, how to bind a splint to hold bone relatively straight. He will invoke the power of runes, perhaps carving a Tiwaz rune onto a piece of wood meant for the splint, believing it grants strength and victory, not just in battle, but over illness. Later, gathered around the fire, you might hear tales from the sagas, stories of legendary heroes who suffered terrible wounds and overcame them through sheer will, or perhaps with the aid of magical charms gifted by the gods. These narratives aren't just entertainment, they're lessons, conveying cultural values of stoicism, resilience, and faith in fate. They also subtly embed a form of medical knowledge, detailing the types of wounds, the immediate reactions, and sometimes the purported cures, even if those cures involve magical elixirs or divine intervention. You are told that illness comes from an imbalance of inner humors, or from elf shot, a sudden, sharp pain caused by invisible elven arrows, or from being fey destined to die. There's no germ theory, no understanding of microscopic invaders. Your body is a vessel, intricately linked to the spiritual world, subject to the whims of the gods and the unseen forces around you. Your knowledge of healing is a patchwork of inherited lore, practical observation, and a profound belief in the power of the mystical, woven into the very fabric of your Norse identity. This is the rudimentary, yet culturally rich, truth of Viking medicine, where knowledge of the body was derived from runes and sagas, transforming basic anatomical understanding into a blend of practical observation, spiritual belief, and legendary narratives, offering a unique, often grim, perspective on health and healing. It's like trying to fix a complex machine using only ancient poems and symbols, rather than a detailed engineering manual. It truly sucked to have your primary medical textbooks be epic poems and cryptic carvings, rather than scientific treatises. Viking Age society possessed a rudimentary, yet functional, understanding of the human body and illness, often expressed through the cultural lenses of Viking medicine, deeply intertwined with the wisdom of runes and sagas. Their knowledge was primarily empirical, derived from practical experience with injuries and common ailments, rather than systematic scientific inquiry. Key aspects of their medical understanding included empirical observation. Healers learned from direct observation of wounds, especially from combat, fractures, and the symptoms of common illnesses. They knew how to set bones, stitch wounds, and staunch bleeding. Based on centuries of trial and error, holistic view of health was not seen merely as the absence of disease, but as a balance between the physical body, the mind, and spiritual forces. Illness was often attributed to an imbalance of internal humors, the influence of malevolent spirits, curses, or divine displeasure. Anatomical knowledge. While they lacked detailed anatomical charts, Viking healers had a practical understanding of major bones, muscles, and organs, particularly those visible through injury or animal butchery. They understood the importance of the heart as a life source and the brain for thought. Runes as healing tools. Runes were not just an alphabet, they were believed to possess magical and protective powers. Specific runes were associated with healing, strength, or victory, and were inscribed on amulets, weapons, or directly on the body as part of a healing ritual. Sagas as cultural transmitters. The sagas, epic narratives of heroes and gods, often detailed injuries, illnesses, and deaths, sometimes even describing healing methods or supernatural interventions. These stories reinforced cultural values of stoicism in the face of suffering and provided a framework for understanding and coping with illness. Common historical truth is that Viking medicine was characterized by a practical, empirically based approach to wound care and bone setting, combined with a strong spiritual and folkloric component, with understanding of the body and illness often woven into the cultural fabric of runes and sagas. This blend of the practical and the mystical offered what little medical comfort was available in an era without scientific diagnostics or treatments. Historians still widely debate the precise extent and sophistication of Viking anatomical knowledge, as direct written medical treatises are scarce. With much of the evidence gleaned from archaeological findings like healed bone fractures and interpretations of poetic and prose eddas, a fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about Viking medicine. Runes and sagas is the curious phenomenon of healing poetry, leknesvisur or galdrar, specific poetic verses or stanzas, often found embedded in sagas or runic inscriptions, that were recited as part of a healing ritual, believed to literally sing the illness away or invoke divine aid, highlighting the profound belief in the power of language and rhythm to affect physical well-being in a world where words were often considered as potent as any physical remedy. Imagine old Bjorn, perhaps too weary for complex rituals, simply chanting a short, powerful verse over his ailing son, the rhythmic words echoing through the longhouse, a direct plea to the ancient forces woven into the very fabric of Norse lore, a subtle form of literary prowess, a callback to the sophisticated written culture of Chinese scholars. But here, it's about oral magical power for healing. It's like having a magical incantation be your primary prescription for a serious illness. It truly sucked to have your deepest hopes for recovery tied to a magical poem, rather than a proven scientific cure. The detailed, albeit rudimentary, understanding that comprised Viking medicine through runes and sagas unfolded in various practical and spiritual dimensions. Basic anatomy from experience. Vikings gained practical anatomical knowledge primarily from two sources: animal butchery and human injuries, especially those from combat. They understood the location of major organs, the skeletal structure, and where arteries could be found, and therefore how to staunch bleeding. They would know that a wound to the head was far more dangerous than one to the limb. For instance, this was not formal study, but lived experience, humoral theory, Norse adaptation. While not as formalized as the Greek or Chinese humoral theories, there was a belief that imbalances within the body's juices or humors could cause illness. For example, excess heat might cause fever, or cold might lead to stiffness. Remedies often aim to restore balance through hot or cold compresses. Specific herbs or dietary adjustments. The power of runes. Runes were central to Norse belief. Each rune had a name, a sound, and a symbolic meaning, often linked to cosmic forces or deities. For healing, specific runes like Uru's strength, healing, Lagu's life, healing flow, or Sawilo wholeness, vital force might be carved onto amulets worn by the sick, inscribed on a piece of wood and placed under a pillow, or even lightly scratched onto the skin. The belief was that the rune itself, as a sacred symbol, could channel healing energy or ward off malevolent influences. The Lekna might even combine different runes to form a bind rune for a more powerful effect. Sagas as case studies and moral lessons. The sagas, transmitted orally and later written down, contained countless descriptions of injuries and illnesses. While not medical texts, They offered a collective memory of how people suffered, how they reacted, and the outcomes. They reinforced the cultural ideal of Stoicism in the face of pain, as we saw with the harsh world in Chapter 1, and sometimes even described attempts at treatment, albeit often in a mythological context. For example, a saga might describe a warrior's gruesome wound and his eventual recovery or death, offering insights into the common understanding of such trauma. They provided a framework for shared experience and cultural coping mechanisms, making the inexplicable somewhat more comprehensible through narrative. Charms and incantations. Galder has noted healing poetry or Galder magical chants were central. These verses, often rhythmic and alliterative, were believed to have direct power to heal, protect, or bind malevolent forces. They were recited over wounds, ailing bodies, or during the preparation of remedies. The idea was that words spoken with conviction and ritual could directly influence reality and bring about desired outcomes. These were as vital as any physical remedy. Spiritual causation of illness, most ailments, especially the severe ones not clearly linked to injury, were attributed to spiritual causes. Elf shot. A sudden, sharp pain like a stitch in the side or a sudden cramp was sometimes believed to be caused by invisible arrows shot by elves. Remedies involved charms to deflect these attacks. Draugerbane. Sickness caused by the malevolent spirit of the undead Draugr, often manifesting as wasting diseases or mental anguish. Displeased deities. As with mysterious plagues, illness could be a sign of a god's displeasure, requiring offerings or specific rituals to regain favor. Magic and curses. A person could be made ill by the ill will or magic of an enemy or rival. Counter charms and protective runes were used to ward off such attacks. The healer as a mediator. The Lekna or Kona was not just a medical practitioner, but also a spiritual mediator, capable of interpreting omens, communicating with spirits, and negotiating with deities on behalf of the sick. Their authority was rooted in both empirical knowledge and perceived spiritual power. In essence, Viking medicine was a pragmatic response to an ever-present threat of illness and injury. Filtered through a spiritual and mythological lens, the runes and sagas provided both a framework for understanding the body's vulnerabilities and a toolkit for intervention, however limited. For Bjorn, watching the Lekna work, it wasn't just about the herbs or the splint, it was about the intention, the ancient wisdom passed down, and the hope that the powerful forces invoked through ritual and symbol would turn the tide of sickness. This deep intertwining of the physical and the mystical was a defining characteristic of their approach to health. A world away from the sterile, purely scientific methodologies of modern clinics in, say, Chicago, Illinois, or the cutting-edge research labs in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Let's gently return from the ancient, interwoven world of Viking medicine, where knowledge of the body and its ailments was gleaned from runes and sagas. If we've just explored their blend of empirical observation and spiritual belief, tonight we'll delve into a particularly brutal and common reality of their existence battle scars. Wounds of war. You might imagine swift, heroic deaths, but for your medieval ancestor, the clash of steel often meant agonizing, lingering injuries, requiring crude, painful interventions, turning the aftermath of conflict into a desperate, often futile, fight for survival against pain, infection, and disfigurement. Imagine yourself now, our seasoned Bjorn, perhaps in his late 30s, having grown through the harsh world. Chapter 1 endured countless everyday ills. Chapter 2 survived the terror of mysterious plagues. Chapter 3 benefited from the healing hands of folk remedies and rituals. Chapter 4 and possessed a practical understanding of Viking medicine. Chapter 5 you are no longer just a settler, you are a respected warrior, a huskarl in the retinue of a local chieftain, in what we'll imagine as the rocky, windswept coastline of Newfoundland, Canada, a place renowned for its harsh beauty and its unforgiving seas. You've been on raids, seen skirmishes, and always managed to emerge relatively unscathed. But today, fate has turned a cruel hand. You are on a raid against a rival chieftain's stronghold, a fierce, brutal skirmish. The clash of axes on shields, the screams of men, the clang of steel. It's chaos. In the thick of it, a swing from an enemy's axe connects not with your shield, but your left arm, just below the shoulder. The impact is staggering, a blinding flash of pain. You feel a sickening crunch, hear the tearing of flesh. You drop to one knee, the world spinning. Blood, warm and thick, immediately gushes, soaking your wool tunic. This isn't a clean cut, it's a hacking, crushing wound. Bone likely fractured, muscles severed. This is the grim reality of battle scars, the terrible wounds of war. Back at the temporary camp, or perhaps after a grueling journey back to your longhouse. The Leikna healer attends to you. There's no modern emergency room, no sterile operating theater. You are laid on a rough hide, your comrades holding you down. The pain is excruciating, a raw, constant agony that makes you want to scream. But you bite back the cries, upholding the warrior's stoicism from the sagas. The healer first attempts to stop the bleeding, perhaps packing the wound with moss or applying a red-hot iron to cauterize the larger vessels. The smell of burning flesh sickening you. Then comes the examination, probing the wound with unwashed hands, assessing the damage. If the bone is exposed, he might try to realign it as best he can, without x-rays, without precise knowledge of the break. He pulls the ragged edges of your skin together with rough needles and coarse thread made from gut or plant fibers, a process that makes you gasp. There's no anesthesia, no pain medication beyond a possible swig of strong ale or a chew of poppy if available. Then comes the constant worry of infection, the fever fire that consumes so many. You will lie there for days, weeks, perhaps months, your life hanging by a thread, your arm throbbing with a dull, incessant ache, a constant reminder of the brutal cost of conflict. This is the agonizing, visceral truth of battle scars, where the wounds of war were not just marks of courage, but indelible reminders of suffering, transforming the aftermath of combat into a desperate, often protracted, fight for survival against agonizing pain and the ever-present threat of infection and lasting disfigurement. It's like getting into a horrific car accident, but the only hospital is a guy with a rusty toolbox and a bottle of whiskey. It truly sucked to survive the battle, only to face a brutal, agonizing, and often ultimately fatal struggle against your own injuries. The Viking Age was renowned for its conflicts, whether through internal feuds, raiding expeditions, or larger-scale military campaigns. Consequently, battle scars and the more severe wounds of war were common occurrences, representing a significant cause of mortality and long-term disability. The treatment of these injuries was rudimentary, painful, and often unsuccessful, making survival a testament to resilience, luck, and the body's own healing capacity. The severity and outcomes of these wounds were determined by weaponry. The primary weapons, axes, swords, spears, bows, inflicted deep, often jagged cuts, crushing blows, and puncture wounds, all highly prone to infection. Lack of sterile technique. Without understanding germ theory, all wound care was performed in unsanitary conditions with unsterilized tools and hands, making infection almost inevitable. Absence of anesthesia and pain management. All procedures were done without effective pain relief, leading to immense suffering for the patient. Limited surgical expertise. While some healers developed practical skills in wound closing and bone setting, complex internal injuries or severe trauma were largely untreatable. Exposure and environment wounds sustained in battle or during arduous travel were often exposed to dirt, cold, and dampness, further increasing the risk of infection. Common historical truth is that battle scars and wounds of war in the Viking Age were not just badges of honor, but also severe, life-threatening conditions, frequently leading to agonizing pain, rampant infection, and long-term disability due to the brutal nature of contemporary weaponry and the complete absence of modern medical or antiseptic practices. These injuries exacted a heavy toll, often making the post-battle recovery more perilous than the conflict itself. Historians still widely debate the precise survival rates for specific types of combat wounds in the Viking Age. Relying on osteoarchaeological evidence healed versus unhealed fractures, cut marks on bones, and comparative studies with other pre-modern military populations to infer outcomes. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about battle scars. Wounds of war is the curious phenomenon of skull wounds that show signs of partial healing or even successful trepanation drilling holes in the skull found in archaeological remains, suggesting that despite the incredibly rudimentary medical practices, some individuals actually survived severe head trauma, perhaps even recovering from brain injuries, offering a chilling glimpse into both the brutality of Viking combat and the occasional astonishing resilience of the human body and the rudimentary, yet sometimes effective interventions of Viking healers. Imagine our Bjorn lying wounded, knowing that even a blow to the head, a seemingly fatal injury, wasn't always a death sentence, a testament to the incredible, desperate fight for life that could sometimes be won against all odds. It's like someone surviving being shot in the head with a primitive musket, and then having their brain surgery performed by a blacksmith with a drill, and living. It truly sucked to have your best chance at surviving a severe head injury involve someone literally drilling a hole in your skull while you were awake. But then again, it was your only chance. The specific, brutal reality of battle scars and the agonizing nature of wounds of war manifested in numerous ways. Lacerations and puncture wounds. Swords and axes inflicted deep, gaping lacerations, often exposing bone or severing muscles and tendons. Spears caused deep puncture wounds, carrying dirt and debris deep into the body, leading to rapid internal infection and organ damage. These were not clean, precise surgical cuts. They were tearing, crushing injuries that left wide-open portals for disease, amputations for limbs severely crushed, gangrenous or hopelessly fractured. Often a consequence of infection after a seemingly minor injury. Amputation was a last desperate resort. This brutal procedure would be performed with crude tools, an axe or a saw without anesthesia, pain relief, or any understanding of sterility. The stump would be cauterized with a hot iron to stop bleeding, and then crudely bandaged. The shock, blood loss, and inevitable infection leading to sepsis meant that most individuals would die from this procedure. Even if one survived, the disfigurement and disability would be lifelong and severe, forever affecting their ability to work or fight. Fractures and dislocations. Blunt force trauma from clubs, shields, or falls could cause broken bones and dislocated joints. While simple fractures like a broken arm or leg might be set with splints, as seen with Thora in Chapter 5, compound fractures where the bone breaks through the skin were highly prone to infection and often led to amputation or death. Improperly set bones would heal deformed, causing chronic pain and impaired function. Head trauma blows to the head from axes or maces were common and often fatal. While some individuals, as seen in the skull wounds phenomenon, survived even severe head injuries, many would suffer immediate death, permanent brain damage, or succumb to internal bleeding, infection like meningitis, or swelling. Trepanation, as mentioned, was an extreme and risky attempt to relieve pressure or evil spirits, infection, and gangrene. This was the silent, ubiquitous killer after any serious wound. Every wound, however small, was contaminated by dirt, clothing, and the unwashed hands and tools of the healer. Bacteria would multiply rapidly, leading to pus formation, foul odors, swelling, fever, and eventually gangrene tissue death. Once gangrene set in, the limb would turn black, smell putrid, and death from sepsis was almost certain, unless a swift and successful amputation could be performed. Blood loss and shock. Severe wounds led to rapid blood loss, causing shock, a life-threatening condition where the body cannot deliver enough blood to the organs. Without transfusions or modern methods to manage shock, this alone could be fatal within minutes or hours of a major injury. Internal injuries. Puncture wounds to the torso or crushing blows could cause severe internal bleeding or damage to organs, lungs. Liver. Intestines. These injuries were virtually untreatable. A healer might suspect internal damage, but without surgical capability or diagnostic tools, little could be done, and death was almost inevitable. Chronic pain and disability. Even for those who survived their initial wounds and avoided fatal infection, the long-term consequences were often devastating. Chronic pain from improperly healed bones or nerve damage, permanent lameness, missing limbs, disfiguring scars, or impaired vision were common realities. These individuals would be unable to participate in physically demanding tasks, impacting their social standing and their ability to contribute to their families and communities, often leaving them in poverty's shadow, as we'll discuss in Chapter 8. Psychological trauma. Beyond the physical pain, the mental and emotional toll of such wounds would have been immense. The vivid memory of battle, the agony of treatment, and the lifelong disfigurement would leave deep psychological scars. Though there was no concept of treating such trauma in the Viking Age, the warrior's stoicism from the sagas was not just a cultural ideal, but a necessary survival mechanism. For Bjorn, lying wounded and helpless, the battle scars he now carried were not just marks of a warrior's courage. They were etched in his very flesh, a chilling testament to the brutal, unyielding reality of his world. Every throb of pain, every feverish chill, was a visceral reminder that the moment of combat was often just the beginning of a far more agonizing and precarious struggle for life. Surviving the fight was one thing. Surviving the aftermath of the wounds of war was an entirely different, and often far more challenging, ordeal. A grim reflection of a time when the human body was a remarkably resilient, yet terrifyingly vulnerable vessel against the forces of conflict and disease, making us truly grateful for the advanced trauma care, sterile surgical environments, and pain management technologies available today. Whether you're recovering from an injury in a modern hospital in New Orleans, Louisiana, or undergoing rehabilitation in a specialized clinic in Denver. Colorado. Let's gently return from the visceral reality of battle scars, those agonizing wounds of war that marked a Viking's very flesh and often determined their ultimate fate. If we've just explored the brutal consequences of conflict, tonight we'll delve into a more insidious, yet equally pervasive threat to well-being, diet, and disease. The daily grind. You might imagine a rustic but wholesome diet, but for your medieval ancestor, the quality, consistency, and very nature of their daily sustenance profoundly influenced their vulnerability to illness, turning every meal into a subtle yet significant factor in their ongoing struggle for health. Imagine yourself now, our resilient Bjorn, perhaps in his 40s, his body bearing the inevitable battle scars. Chapter 6, from years of conflict and hard living. He has weathered the harsh world. Chapter 1, survived everyday ills. Chapter 2, endured the terror of mysterious plagues. Chapter 3, benefited from the healing hands of folk remedies and rituals. Chapter 4, and understands the rudiments of Viking medicine. Chapter 5, he is now a patriarch, responsible not just for himself, but for his family and the small farm he tends, in what we'll envision as the fertile but challenging coastal plains of Northumberland, England, a place where Norse settlers eventually blended with the local Anglo-Saxons. But even in this seemingly more stable life, an unseen enemy is constantly at work, the subtle, yet profound, impact of diet and disease. Dictated by the daily grind of subsistence living, you rise before dawn, your joints stiff from the damp chill that penetrates your longhouse. Your breakfast is typically a bowl of thin porridge, perhaps some dried fish if you're lucky, washed down with ale or water. There's no fresh fruit in winter, no green vegetables beyond what little root vegetables could be stored. Your daily work is arduous plowing fields with oxen, repairing fences, mending fishing nets, or tending to the livestock. Your meals are dictated by the seasons, by the success of the hunt, the harvest, or the fishing expeditions. In summer, there might be wild berries, fresh eggs, and more abundant fish. But come winter, the diet becomes monotonous, heavily reliant on preserved foods, dried or salted meat and fish, root vegetables stored in pits, and grains for gruel and bread. You notice it in your own body, a persistent dull ache in your gums that sometimes bleed. You don't know this is scurvy, a lack of vitamin C. You often feel tired, even after a full night's sleep, a constant underlying fatigue that you attribute to hard work, but might be anemia, lack of iron. Your skin is often dry and cracked, your hair somewhat brittle. You frequently suffer from stomach upsets, not the violent, acute infections of the bellyache from Chapter 2, but a more chronic discomfort, often due to a diet high in fiber, sometimes low in variety, and occasionally contaminated with molds or parasites from poorly stored food. You've seen your children with distended bellies, even when seemingly fed, a sign of parasitic worms that steal their nutrients. And when sickness does strike, whether a fever or a bad cough, your body, already strained by a limited diet, struggles to fight it off. Your immune system, unlike that of a modern American in, say, Minneapolis, Minnesota, who benefits from year-round access to fresh produce and fortified foods, is constantly walking a tightrope. Just one missed harvest or spoiled batch of meat away from collapse. This is the subtle yet deeply impactful truth of diet and disease, where the very nature of your daily grind in acquiring food profoundly shaped your health. Turning every meal into a battle for vital nutrients and every shortage into a doorway for debilitating illness. It's like trying to build a strong castle with only half the necessary bricks, and then wondering why the walls keep crumbling. It truly sucked to have your meals, the very source of your energy, also be the source of your silent, chronic debilitation. In the Viking Age, the connection between diet and disease was fundamental, though largely ununderstood. The daily rhythms of life, or the daily grind, revolved around securing sustenance, and the quality and availability of food directly impacted an individual's susceptibility to various ailments. Shaping the overall health profile of the population, factors influencing their diet and health included seasonal availability. Food sources were heavily dependent on the seasons. Fresh produce, berries, and certain types of fish or game were only available at specific times of the year. Preservation methods. To survive long winters and voyages, food had to be preserved, primarily through salting, drying, smoking, or fermentation. These methods, while effective for preservation, could alter nutritional content or introduce new health risks. Geographic variation diets varied significantly based on location. Coastal communities relied more on fish and marine mammals, while inland areas focused on agriculture and livestock. Limited knowledge of nutrition. There was no concept of vitamins, minerals, or macronutrients. Food choices were driven by availability, cultural tradition, and caloric needs, not by scientific nutritional principles. Food contamination, lack of hygiene as seen in earlier chapters during food preparation and storage, along with the prevalence of pests, meant food could easily become contaminated with bacteria, molds, or parasites, leading to chronic illness. Common historical truth is that diet and disease were intricately linked during the Viking Age, with the daily grind of securing and preserving food directly impacting the prevalence of deficiency diseases, parasitic infections, and overall immune strength. Seasonal variations, limited preservation methods, and a lack of nutritional understanding meant chronic, low-grade ailments were common, constantly challenging the population's health. Historians still widely debate the precise balance of protein, fat, and carbohydrates in the average Viking diet, and how this varied seasonally and regionally. Relying on a combination of archaeological evidence, food remains, faunal analyses, written sagas, and comparative ethnography, a fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about diet and disease. The daily grind is the curious phenomenon of bog butter or fulacht fiad sites in Ireland. Large quantities of butter or other fats found preserved in peat bogs, often hundreds or thousands of years old, believed to have been stored there not just for preservation but possibly for ritualistic reasons or to enhance its medicinal properties, hinting at a desperate understanding of fat as a vital, life-sustaining nutrient in a challenging diet, and perhaps even a crude health supplement. Imagine our Bjorn relying on the rare, pungent bog butter, knowing it's kept him alive through lean winters, viewing it almost as a magical, life-giving substance, a testament to the primal, desperate ways Vikings sought sustenance and health in their harsh world. It's like finding ancient, preserved energy bars in a swamp. But they taste like dirt and only work because you're half-starved. It truly sucked to have your most potent health supplement be a chunk of ancient, slightly rancid fat dug out of the ground. The various ways diet and disease intersected through the daily grind were profound. Deficiency diseases. Scurvy a major threat, especially during long winters or sea voyages, due to the lack of vitamin C found in fresh fruits, vegetables, and certain organ meats. Symptoms included bleeding gums, loose teeth, skin lesions, fatigue, and internal hemorrhaging, often leading to death. Imagine the agony of losing your teeth and your strength simply because the season offered no fresh berries. Anemia widespread due to insufficient iron from limited meat, and poor iron absorption from grain-heavy diets. Symptoms included chronic fatigue, weakness, pale skin, and reduced immune function, making individuals more susceptible to other infections. This would have contributed to the pervasive, low-level exhaustion that characterized daily life. Rickets, osteomalacia, caused by vitamin D deficiency important for bone health. Common in northern latitudes with long, dark winters and limited sun exposure, led to weakened, deformed bones, particularly in children rickets and adults osteomalacia, causing pain and disability, parasitic infections, contaminated water sources, raw or undercooked meat, and poor personal hygiene meant parasitic worms like tapeworms, roundworms, and whipworms were endemic. These parasites would leach nutrients from their hosts, causing chronic abdominal pain, digestive upset, weakness, and contributing to malnutrition, especially in children, giving them distended bellies even when fed. Food poisoning and bacterial infections. Lack of refrigeration and rudimentary preservation methods meant food spoilage was common. Eating contaminated meat, fish, or dairy products led to acute bouts of food poisoning, causing severe vomiting, diarrhea, and dehydration. These episodes, while often short-lived, could be fatal, especially for the very young or the very old, adding to the everyday ills and contributing to rapid decline during mysterious plagues. Dental health. A coarse, grain-heavy diet, combined with the complete absence of dental hygiene, led to widespread tooth decay, gum disease, and abscesses. As discussed in Chapter 2, untreated dental infections could spread to the jaw or even the brain, leading to agonizing death. Imagine having a constantly throbbing toothache, unable to eat, but with no dentist in sight. Impact on immune system. Chronic malnutrition and persistent parasitic infections significantly weaken the immune system. A body that is constantly fighting to extract nutrients from a limited diet is less equipped to combat invading pathogens. This meant that what might be a minor cold in a modern individual could quickly escalate into deadly pneumonia in a Viking. Seasonal hunger. The hunger gap. Even in good years, there was a period in late winter, early spring when stored provisions ran low and new crops were not yet ready. This hunger gap, or hungry season, meant a period of severe caloric restriction and nutrient deficiency, leaving the population particularly vulnerable to disease just as the last of the winter illnesses might be lingering. Impact of famine. In years of severe crop failure, harsh winters, or disrupted trade routes perhaps due to conflict, adding to the dangers of wounds of war, full-blown famine could strike. This meant widespread starvation, drastically increased mortality rates, and a complete breakdown of communal health. making the survivors even more susceptible to mysterious plagues. Alcohol consumption. While ale provided some calories and was often safer to drink than water, excessive consumption, especially of stronger fermented beverages, could lead to its own set of health problems, including liver damage and increased susceptibility to injury. Food preparation methods. Cooking methods were basic. While fire helped kill some pathogens, smoke inhalation from unvented longhouse fires, as seen in Chapter 1, would have contributed to chronic respiratory issues, exacerbating the health's toll, which we'll discuss in Chapter 9. For Bjorn, the act of eating was not merely about satisfying hunger. It was a constant, unspoken negotiation with his environment. Every successful hunt, every bountiful harvest, every well-preserved barrel of fish was a small victory against the ever-present threat of nutritional deficiency and the diseases that followed in its wake. The very essence of his daily grind was inextricably linked to his struggle for health, making his plate, however meager, a testament to his ongoing fight for survival. This fundamental connection between diet and disease defined much of the brutal reality of the Viking Age, a world far removed from the nutritional science and diverse supermarket aisles of today. Whether you're meticulously planning your balanced meals in a modern home in Seattle, Washington, or simply grabbing a healthy snack in a convenience store in Miami, Florida, let's gently return from the subtle yet pervasive reality of diet and disease, that relentless daily grind that silently shaped the health of a Viking. If we've just explored how sustenance impacted survival, tonight we'll delve into a particularly acute and terrifying danger, one that threatened the very continuation of their lineage, childbirth's peril. A mother's ordeal. You might imagine a delivery room with skilled medical staff, but for your medieval ancestor, bringing a new life into the world was often a solitary, agonizing struggle, a literal fight for survival that could claim both mother and child in a moment, making it one of the most brutal and defining experiences of a woman's life. Imagine yourself, now, our resilient Bjorn, perhaps in your mid-40s, having seen much of the harsh world. Chapter 1, survived countless everyday ills. Chapter 2, endured the terror of mysterious plagues. Chapter 3, relied on the healing hands of folk remedies and rituals. Chapter 4, understood Viking medicine. Chapter 5, born battle scars. Chapter 6, and navigated the challenges of diet and disease. Chapter 7, you have a growing family, a testament to your prosperity and the resilience of your line. But now it is your beloved wife, Freya, who is approaching her time to give birth again. Her previous births were difficult, and this one feels especially fraught with worry. This is the profound, terrifying reality of childbirth's peril, the ultimate mother's ordeal. Freya has been in labor for what feels like an eternity, the sun already dipping below the horizon as she first felt the tightening. You pace anxiously outside the small, secluded birthing hut, or perhaps within a designated corner of your longhouse, away from the prying eyes of men. Inside, only women are allowed Freya, her own mother, and the village Kona wise woman, whose healing hands from Chapter 4 are now dedicated entirely to this perilous process. You hear Freya's cries, muffled and raw, sounds of pain that tear at your heart. There are no epidurals, no C-sections, no sterile instruments, no trained midwives beyond the experienced, but limited skills of the Kona. It is a natural process, but one fraught with unseen dangers. You know the statistics, though no one speaks them aloud. Many women do not survive childbirth. Many infants do not survive their first few days or weeks. Complications like prolonged labor, severe bleeding, or infection after birth are silent killers. You pray to the gods, to Frigg, the goddess of motherhood, to Freya, and even to Odin, for strength and a swift outcome. You hear whispers of a breech birth, or of a child too large, or of the mother simply weakening, her life force draining away. The atmosphere outside is tensed, filled with unspoken fears, the scent of herbs burning inside, meant to ward off evil spirits and ease the pain. mingles with the faint, metallic tang of blood. You recall the stories of women who simply faded away after a difficult birth, succumbing to the invisible childbed fever. This is a battle, as fierce as any you've faced on the raiding grounds, but fought by a woman in the most vulnerable state, without shield or axe, relying solely on her own raw strength, the limited knowledge of her attendants, and the capricious will of fate. This is the profound, agonizing truth of childbirth's peril, the mother's ordeal, transforming the act of bringing life into a world into a literal, desperate fight for survival that often claimed both parent and child. Defining a woman's existence by its inherent, harrowing risks, it's like sending your loved one into a high-stakes life or death gladiatorial combat, but it's happening inside their own body, and the opponent is completely unseen. It truly sucked to know that the most natural act of life was also one of the leading causes of death for women. In the Viking Age, childbirth's peril was an inherent and terrifying reality for every woman, making it perhaps the most dangerous and defining mother's ordeal. Maternal and infant mortality rates were exceptionally high, reflecting the lack of medical understanding, sterile practices, and effective interventions for complications. Key factors contributing to this extreme danger included lack of antiseptics and sterile procedures. Childbirth, by its very nature, creates open wounds, especially if tears occur, providing direct entry points for bacteria. Without understanding germ theory, all instruments, if any, were used and hands were unsterilized, leading to rampant puerperal fever, childbed fever, and other infections. Absence of pain. Management labor was endured without any effective pain relief, leading to extreme exhaustion, shock, and potentially hindering the labor process. Limited obstetric knowledge. While experienced women and konas had practical knowledge of normal births, they lacked anatomical understanding of complicated presentations, yaishi, breech births, or the ability to intervene surgically. Nutritional status of mother. A mother's pre-existing health, often weakened by diet and disease. Chapter 7 and constant physical labor directly impacted her ability to withstand the rigors of labor and recovery. Postpartum complications, hemorrhage. Infection and eclampsia were common and often fatal complications after birth, with little to no effective treatment. Common historical truth is that childbirth's peril was an exceptionally high-risk event in the Viking Age, making it a critical mother's ordeal that frequently resulted in the death of the mother, the infant, or both, largely due to complications like infection, hemorrhage, and prolonged labor compounded by a complete absence of modern obstetric care or understanding of sterile practices. This constant threat profoundly shaped demographic patterns and the social roles of women within Viking society. Historians still widely debate the precise rates of maternal and infant mortality during the Viking Age due to the scarcity of detailed birth records, relying instead on osteoarchaeological evidence, skeletal signs of childbirth stress, comparative demographic studies of pre-industrial societies, and interpretations of saga literature, a fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about childbirth's peril. A mother's ordeal is the curious phenomenon of birthstones, or protective amulets, often small, naturally perforated stones, or carved figures of deities like Frigg, found in some Viking-era graves associated with women, suggesting their desperate use during labor as magical aids to ward off evil spirits, ease pain, or invoke divine protection, highlighting the profound spiritual and superstitious dimensions woven into the harrowing experience of childbirth. Imagine Freya clutching such a stone or amulet, her knuckles white with pain, her only hope beyond her own strength resting in the power of a tiny piece of rock or carved symbol, a poignant testament to the human need for control and hope in the face of overwhelming, inexplicable danger. It's like going into a major surgery and your only lucky charm is a pebble you found by the river. It truly sucked to have your primary form of comfort during life-threatening labor be a magical rock. The specific, brutal realities of childbirth peril and the harrowing mother's ordeal manifested in numerous ways. Prolonged labor and exhaustion. Without pain relief or interventions like oxytocin, labor could last for days, leading to extreme exhaustion and dehydration, a mother's strength, already taxed by the daily grind. Chapter 7 and potentially underlying diet and disease could simply give out, leading to fetal distress and death for both. Hemorrhage, excessive bleeding postpartum hemorrhage, was a leading cause of maternal death. There were no effective ways to stop severe bleeding, no blood transfusions, and a woman could bleed to death within hours. The Kona might apply pressure or herbal concoctions, but these were often insufficient. Infection. Childbed fever. This was perhaps the most common and terrifying killer. Any unsterile contact with the birth canal, whether from hands, instruments, or even contaminated bedding, could introduce bacteria. Puerperal fever would set in within days after birth, causing raging fever, chills, abdominal pain, and rapid progression to sepsis and death. The lack of understanding about hygiene, a constant problem from earlier chapters, like the filth and disease in the harsh world, made this an almost inevitable threat for every birthing woman. Complicated births, breech, transverse, etc. If the baby was not positioned head-first breech presentation, transverse lie, or shoulder dystocia, the birth became incredibly difficult, often impossible without modern interventions. The Kona might attempt manual rotation, but without proper training, this was risky and could injure both mother and child, often leading to stillbirth or maternal death. Fetal distress and stillbirth. Long, difficult labors, umbilical cord complications, or pre-existing maternal health issues could lead to the baby dying before or during birth. Stillbirths were a heartbreaking, yet common, tragedy. Injuries to mother and child. The immense pressure of childbirth, especially without modern interventions, could cause severe vaginal tearing, uterine rupture, or pelvic fractures in the mother, leading to long-term pain, incontinence, or fatal bleeding. For the infant, difficult births could result in head trauma, broken bones, or brain damage, eclampsia, a severe complication of pregnancy involving high blood pressure, seizures, and organ damage, unrecognized and untreated. It was almost always fatal for both mother and child. Postnatal care. Even if mother and child survived the immediate birth, the postnatal period remained precarious. The mother was weak, vulnerable to infection, and often exhausted. The infant, too, faced high risks from infections, feeding difficulties, and congenital issues that would go undiagnosed. Infant mortality rates were shockingly high within the first year of life. Social and psychological impact. The constant threat of maternal death created immense anxiety within families and communities. The loss of a mother was devastating for a family, especially for young children who would likely face a harsher existence without her care. Survivors would carry the emotional scars of such loss. Isolation. During birth was often a secluded event, typically attended only by women. While this offered privacy, it also limited the number of experienced people available in case of severe complications. Relying heavily on the single Kona and perhaps the mother's own female relatives. For Freya, the hours stretched on, each contraction a wave of agony, each push a monumental effort. Her life, and the life of her unborn child, hung precariously in the balance. There was no escape from the pain, no certainty of survival. The birthing hut became a crucible, a place where life and death danced in a harrowing embrace, the most intimate and profound of battle scars that a woman could endure. This silent, terrifying ordeal defined much of women's lives in the Viking Age, a grim and stark reminder of how far humanity has come in safeguarding the miracle of birth. Whether you're celebrating a new arrival in a state-of-the-art maternity ward in New York City, New York, or attending a prenatal class in a community center in rural Montana, let's gently return from the profound, terrifying reality of childbirth's peril, that ultimate mother's ordeal that so often marked a Viking woman's life with harrowing danger. If we've just explored the brutal risks of bringing new life into the world, tonight we'll delve into the final, inevitable chapter that awaited everyone the end draws near, facing death. You might imagine a serene passage into the afterlife or a dignified farewell, but for your medieval ancestor, death was a stark, ever-present companion, met with a complex blend of stoicism, fear, and a deep-seated belief in a vibrant, often terrifying post-life journey, transforming the final moments into a profound, spiritual and communal event. Imagine yourself, now, our resilient Bjorn, well into your 50s, perhaps even your early 60s. A rare age to reach in this harsh world. Exi, Chapter 1. You've survived everyday ills. Chapter 2. Mysterious plagues. Chapter 3. The limitations of healing hands and Viking medicine. Chapter 4 and 5. The brutal reality of battle scars. Chapter 6. And the insidious challenges of diet and disease. Chapter 7. Even seeing your wife. Freya, through the peril of childbirth. Chapter 8. Your body is now a tapestry of aches and old injuries. Your eyesight dimming, your strength waning. You know your time is approaching. This is the somber, yet inevitable. Reality of the end draws near, and the deeply personal act of facing death. It starts subtly. Perhaps a persistent cough that doesn't leave you, growing weaker with each passing winter. Or maybe it's a nagging pain in your belly that intensifies, making it impossible to keep food down, slowly draining your life force. There's no hospital bed, no hospice care, no last-ditch medical intervention. You are at home, in your familiar longhouse, surrounded by your family. The air is smoky from the central hearth. Familiar scents of wood smoke, dried fish, and damp earth fill your nostrils. You are tended by your wife, your eldest children, perhaps the village Kona wise woman, but their healing hands. Chapter 4 are now for comfort. Not cure, you are growing colder. Your breath coming in shallow gasps. As your strength fades, your thoughts turn to the journey ahead. You are a Norseman. You believe in the afterlife. Will you go to Valhalla, the Hall of Odin, where fallen warriors feast and fight eternally, or perhaps Fotvanger, Freya's field for those who died a natural death or were chosen by the goddess? Or will it be Helheim, the cold, dark realm for those who died of sickness or old age? The uncertainty, the weight of your deeds, the promise of the sagas, it all weighs on you. Your family prepares you, ensuring your burial shroud is ready, whispering prayers to the gods, hoping to ease your passage. You might ask for your axe to be placed by your side, or for a favorite piece of jewelry to accompany you. The sounds around you grow distant, the murmur of prayers, the quiet sobbing of your wife, the crackle of the fire. You are no longer just Bjorn, the farmer and warrior. You are about to become an ancestor, joining the long line of your kin in the next world. This is the profound, complex truth of the end draws near, where facing death was not a private medical event, but a spiritual and communal journey, transforming the final moments into a profound reflection on fate, honor, and the eternal cosmos. It's like preparing for a long, important voyage, but the destination is unknown, and you can only bring the things you truly believe in. It truly sucked to approach your final moments with such profound uncertainty, yet also with a deep sense of a cosmic journey ahead. In the Viking Age, the end draws near was an ever-present reality, and facing death was a profoundly different experience than in modern times. Death was not hidden away in hospitals. It was a visible, integral part of the life cycle, imbued with significant spiritual and communal meaning. Key aspects of death and dying included high mortality rates, life expectancy was low. People died from a multitude of causes throughout their lives, from infancy, childbirth's peril. Chapter 8, to old age. Death was a constant companion, fostering a certain stoicism, lack of medical intervention. As previously discussed, modern medical interventions were non-existent. Once a person entered a terminal decline, there was little that could be done beyond comfort care, making the dying process often prolonged and painful. Spiritual significance of death. Death was not an end, but a transition to the afterlife. Norse beliefs in Valhalla, Folkvanger, and Helheim shaped how individuals approached their final moments and how their bodies were treated. Communal event death and dying were largely communal affairs, taking place within the family home or longhouse, surrounded by kin and community members. Emphasis on wired fate. The concept of word meant that one's ultimate fate was predetermined. While actions in life could influence one's destiny in the afterlife, the moment of death itself was often accepted as an inevitable decree. Common historical truth is that facing death in the Viking Age was a stark, pervasive reality, with the end draws near representing a profound spiritual transition rather than a medical event. Profoundly shaped by high mortality rates, a lack of medical intervention, and a deep-seated belief in a structured afterlife. The dying process was often communal, with rituals and beliefs guiding the passage from this world to the next. Historians still widely debate the precise nuances of Viking death rituals and beliefs about the afterlife across different regions and social strata, relying heavily on archaeological evidence from graves and burial mounds, alongside interpretations of the Eddas and sagas. A fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about the end draws near. Facing death is the curious phenomenon of ship burials or boat graves, where high-status individuals, and occasionally their retainers or animals, were interred within actual ships or boat-shaped stone settings, equipped with grave goods for their journey to the afterlife, illustrating a profound belief in the continuation of status and the need for earthly provisions in the next realm, transforming the act of burial into a symbolic voyage. Imagine our Bjorn in his final moments, perhaps visualizing himself sailing on such a vessel towards the unseen shores of the afterlife. A powerful image of passage and eternal continuity, even if his actual burial would be far simpler. It's like a medieval funeral director offering a package deal that includes a fully equipped yacht for your celestial journey. Only it's 1,000 years ago and very, very real. It truly sucked to know that your eternal resting place, if you were poor, was just a hole in the ground, while the rich got a full-blown cruise ship. The specific, profound realities of the end draws near, and the solemn process of facing death unfolded in various ways. The dying process. For most, death was a slow decline from chronic illness, like the persistent cough or belly pain we imagined for Bjorn. Perhaps tuberculosis or a chronic digestive ailment, stemming from diet and disease in Chapter 7. Complications from old injuries, battle scars. Chapter 6, or simply the frailty of old age. The body would weaken, the senses dim. Pain might be present, but without modern analgesics, it would be endured or somewhat dulled by traditional herbal remedies from healing hands. Chapter 4, or strong ale. Family would gather, providing warmth, basic nourishment, and emotional comfort. Spiritual preparations. As death approached, the dying individual and their family would engage in spiritual preparations. This might involve reciting Galdrar or charms. Special incantations or poems recall the healing poetry from Chapter 5 might be recited to ease the passage of the soul, to ensure a good reception in the afterlife, or to ward off malevolent spirits that might prey on the dying. Confession or reckoning. Though not a formal sacrament like in Christianity, a dying person might reflect on their deeds, confess any wrongdoings or settle disputes, hoping to ensure a favorable judgment from the gods. Amulets and symbols. Protective amulets. Runic charms from Viking medicine. Chapter 5. Or symbols of deities might be placed on or near the dying person to guide and protect them. The role of the vulva or healer. The vulva seeress or Kona-wise woman might be called upon to interpret omens, perform rituals to facilitate the soul's journey, or to provide spiritual comfort. They might have insights into the dying person's fate or offer guidance for the family. The concept of afterlife. The Norse believed in a multifaceted afterlife, Valhalla, for warriors who died bravely in battle, chosen by Odin's Valkyries. This was the most glorious destination, a hall of feasting and eternal combat preparation. This was the ideal death for a warrior like Bjorn. Folkvanger Freya's field, where half of those who died in battle went, also considered a positive destination. Helheim, the realm of hell, for those who died of sickness, old age, or non-heroic deaths. It was not a place of punishment like Christian hell, but often described as cold, dark, and gloomy. The fear was not of eternal torment, but of a less glorious, perhaps somewhat bleak, existence. This was the likely destination for most, even a strong survivor like Bjorn. Burial mounds and ancestor worship. There was also a strong belief that the dead continued to reside within their burial mounds, remaining connected to their living kin. Offerings might be left at graves, and ancestors invoked for guidance or protection. This was a direct connection to the harsh world they left behind. Burial practices. Burial rituals were highly significant and varied. Cremation common in early Viking Age. Believing that burning released the spirit from the body, grave goods were burned with the deceased. Inhumation became more common later, especially with Christian influence. Yes, bodies were buried in graves, often with significant grave goods. Ship burials. As noted, a prestigious and symbolic form of burial, particularly for chieftains or wealthy individuals, signifying their status and belief in a final voyage. Grave goods items placed with the deceased weapons, tools, jewelry, food. Animals were meant to accompany them to the afterlife, signifying their identity and providing for their needs in the next realm. This reflected the practical mindset of the daily grind even in death. Mourning and feasting. After a death, there would be a period of mourning, often followed by a funeral feast arfar to honor the deceased and commemorate their life. These feasts could be elaborate, cementing social bonds in the lineage of the family. The weight of unfulfilled deeds. For a Viking, dying of old age or sickness, rather than in glorious battle, might carry a subtle sense of unfulfillment, a failure to achieve the ultimate warrior's ideal. This added a psychological dimension to facing death. Even for those who had lived long and accomplished lives, for Bjorn, as life slowly ebbed away, the end draws near was a moment of profound reflection and transition. He was not just losing his life, he was preparing for a new phase of existence, guided by the ancient beliefs and rituals of his people. The sounds of his family, the warmth of the hearth, the scent of the earth, all mingled with the profound uncertainty of what lay beyond. It was a terrifying, yet deeply meaningful conclusion to a life lived fully in a brutal world. A stark contrast to the often sterile, scientifically understood process of death in our modern hospitals in, say, Atlanta, Georgia, or the quiet, private contemplation of mortality in a peaceful home in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Let's gently return from the profound, somber reality of the end draws near, that inevitable journey of facing death in the Viking Age. If we've just explored the spiritual and communal aspects of their final moments, tonight we'll conclude our journey by reflecting on the enduring qualities that allowed them to persevere through such a challenging existence legacy of survival, adaptation, and resilience. You might think of their lives as uniformly harsh, but for your medieval ancestor, the very act of living was a testament to remarkable ingenuity, unwavering toughness, and a deep connection to their world, shaping a lasting legacy of human perseverance. Imagine yourself, now, our resilient Bjorn, long passed from this world, but his spirit and the spirit of his people lives on. You, the listener, are now looking back across the centuries, reflecting on his life and the lives of those who shared his brutal existence in that harsh world. Chapter 1. You remember the constant threat of everyday ills. Chapter 2, and the terror of mysterious plagues. Chapter 3, you recall the desperate yet often profound wisdom of healing hands and Viking medicine. Chapter 4 and 5, the brutal toll of battle scars. Chapter 6, the insidious challenges of diet and disease. Chapter 7, and the harrowing peril of childbirth. Chapter 8, you've journeyed with him through facing death. Chapter 9, and understood its spiritual significance. Now, as the echoes of his life fade, you grasp the profound legacy of survival, a testament to their remarkable adaptation and resilience. Think of the way they built their longhouses sturdy, insulated with turf and timber, a remarkable feat of engineering given their tools, providing shelter from the biting winds and snow. These homes, smoky and communal, were imperfect by modern standards, but they were a vital defense against the elements, a testament to their ingenuity. Consider their longships sleek, swift, capable of navigating treacherous seas, allowing them to fish, trade, raid, and explore across vast oceans. This was not just a boat, it was a symbol of their ability to master their environment, to extend their reach far beyond their immediate shores. A profound act of adaptation to the maritime world they inhabited. They learned to live off the land and sea, developing sophisticated methods of food preservation, salting, drying, smoking that allowed them to endure long winters and sustain lengthy voyages. This wasn't just about filling their bellies, it was about understanding their ecosystem, about being intimately connected to the cycles of nature, and about devising clever solutions to fundamental problems of sustenance. They developed a rich oral tradition, recording their histories, their laws, and their medical knowledge, however rudimentary, in sagas and poetry, passing down vital information and cultural values across generations. Their understanding of ward, or fate, allowed them to face unimaginable hardships with a profound sense of stoicism, finding strength in acceptance and a powerful sense of community, even in the face of widespread death. Their rituals, their beliefs in Valhalla and Helheim, provided a framework for meaning, allowing them to grieve, to hope, and to continue. Their very existence, marked by constant struggle, was not a story of despair but a powerful narrative of human ingenuity, toughness, and an unyielding will to live, to adapt, and to carve out a meaningful existence in a world that constantly sought to break them. This is the enduring truth of their legacy of survival, where their adaptation and resilience transformed a brutal existence into a profound testament to human perseverance, leaving behind a heritage of strength and ingenuity that resonates through the centuries. It's like watching a seemingly fragile plant somehow thrive in the harshest desert, finding ways to draw nourishment and bloom against all odds. It truly didn't suck to be part of a culture where every single day was a quiet triumph of the human spirit over overwhelming odds. The ultimate takeaway from exploring what being sick was like for you during the Viking Age is not just a catalog of suffering, but a profound appreciation for the legacy of survival rooted in the remarkable adaptation and resilience of the Norse people. Despite facing constant threats to their health and lives, they developed innovative ways to cope, persevere, and even thrive in an unforgiving environment. Key aspects of their adaptation and resilience included ingenious technologies. Their mastery of shipbuilding, metalworking, and construction allowed them to create tools, homes, and transportation that were remarkably effective for their time, directly contributing to their ability to survive and expand resourceful livelihoods. They developed diverse economic strategies, farming, fishing, hunting, trading, and raiding, that provided varied resources and allowed them to make the most of their environment. Strong community bonds. The communal nature of their longhouses and their societal structure fostered strong bonds of mutual support, vital for coping with illness, injury, and loss. Individuals were rarely left to suffer alone. Practical knowledge and innovation. While lacking scientific method, they developed a deep empirical understanding of their environment, leading to practical solutions for food, shelter, and rudimentary healing. They weren't static. They observed, experimented, and adapted. Philosophical and spiritual frameworks. Their beliefs in weird fate, the gods, and a structured afterlife provided a powerful psychological framework for coping with hardship, loss, and the inevitability of death, fostering stoicism and a sense of purpose. Physical toughness. The demands of their lifestyle cultivated extreme physical toughness and a high pain tolerance, essential for enduring illness and injury. Common historical truth is that the Viking Age, despite its inherent dangers and challenges to health, stands as a testament to humanity's legacy of survival, driven by profound adaptation and resilience in the face of environmental hardships, disease, and conflict. Their innovative technologies, resourceful livelihoods, strong community structures, and robust philosophical frameworks allowed them to not only endure but to leave a significant cultural and genetic footprint on history. Historians still widely debate the precise psychological and social mechanisms that allowed Viking societies to maintain cohesion and purpose in the face of consistently high mortality rates and pervasive suffering, often attributing it to a combination of their fatalistic worldview, strong communal identity, and emphasis on honor and ancestral legacy. A fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about legacy of survival. Adaptation and resilience is the curious phenomenon of communal healing spaces beyond the single Kona's hut, implied by archaeological finds of large shared cooking pits or temporary structures near natural hot springs in some Norse settlements in Iceland or Greenland, suggesting that entire communities, or at least large groups, would gather in these geothermally heated areas not just for warmth, but for communal bathing, rest, and perhaps ritualized healing in a shared, primitive form of public health retreat, offering a glimpse into their collective coping strategies for chronic pain and widespread fatigue. Imagine the weary Bjorn leading his family to such a steaming pool, the warmth seeping into his aching bones. The shared vulnerability and quiet camaraderie, a profound balm for the relentless stresses of their lives. A moment of communal resilience forged in the heart of the unforgiving landscape. It's like a medieval geothermal spa day, but instead of cucumber water, it's just the raw earth. And instead of relaxation, it's about gritty, communal survival. It truly didn't suck to have natural hot springs as a literal steaming oasis in a world of constant cold and discomfort. The profound dimensions of their legacy of survival through adaptation and resilience are evident in numerous aspects of their daily lives. Mastery of shipbuilding and seafaring. The longship was a pinnacle of Viking ingenuity. It allowed them to navigate vast oceans, providing access to new resources, trade networks, and new lands to settle. This adaptability to the maritime environment was crucial for escaping famine, finding new sources of food, diet, and disease. Chapter 7, and spreading their culture, it literally enabled them to adapt to and conquer a harsh world. Resourceful food management beyond basic preservation. Vikings employed sophisticated farming techniques adapted to their often challenging climates, developed specialized fishing methods, and were skilled hunters. They understood seasonal cycles and how to maximize their limited resources. A constant daily grind that required immense foresight and labor. The bog butter phenomenon, while strange to us, highlights their deep understanding of preserving vital nutrients, innovative housing, and infrastructure. The longhouse, while smoky, was incredibly effective for its time. Its design maximized shared body heat, and its construction utilized readily available materials. They also built specialized structures for storage, animal shelter, and defense, demonstrating practical architectural adaptation to their needs, social cohesion, and mutual support. The emphasis on kinship, clan loyalty, and communal living fostered strong social networks. When someone fell ill, everyday ills. Chapter 2, or a family faced tragedy, childbirth's peril. Chapter 8, the community would often rally, providing support, labor, and collective wisdom from healing hands. Chapter 4, this collective resilience was a powerful counter to individual vulnerability, psychological fortitude, stoicism, and fatalism. The Norse belief in word fate and the heroic ideal of dying well, especially for warriors aiming for Valhalla, as seen in Facing Death. Chapter 9 instilled a remarkable degree of stoicism and acceptance in the face of suffering. This psychological resilience allowed them to endure immense pain battle scars. Chapter 6, and loss, without succumbing to despair. A testament to mental toughness often overlooked in discussions of survival. Practical problem solving. Their approach to medicine, while not scientific, was highly pragmatic. They observed, learned, and applied what worked. Setting bones, using herbs for fever, or understanding the benefits of certain foods were born from centuries of empirical observation and a tenacious drive to find solutions, however limited. Oral tradition and knowledge transfer. The sagas and Eddas, whether recited by the skald poet by the hearth or discussed around a fire, served as crucial repositories of cultural memory, history, law, and even practical advice. This oral transfer of knowledge ensured that lessons learned about survival, healing, and coping with adversity were passed down to new generations, forming a continuous chain of adaptation, environmental harmony in their context. While they certainly impacted their environment, Vikings often developed a deep, intuitive understanding of the natural world around them. They knew the signs of changing weather, the habits of animals, and the properties of plants, living in a constant, dynamic relationship with their surroundings. A crucial aspect of their survival, belief in ancestral strength. The reverence for ancestors and the belief that they continued to influence the living provided a source of strength and continuity. Drawing upon the legacy of those who came before them, who had also faced immense challenges, would have instilled a sense of purpose and belonging, reinforcing their collective resilience. In the end, the brutal life of a Viking, as seen through the lens of illness, pain, and death, was not simply a narrative of suffering. It was a profound testament to the extraordinary capacity of the human spirit to endure, to innovate, and to find meaning in the face of overwhelming odds. Their legacy of survival, built on centuries of relentless adaptation and resilience, reminds us that even in the most challenging times, humanity possesses an incredible, unyielding will to live, to overcome, and to leave its mark. And as you drift towards sleep tonight, let that understanding wash over you. Feel the quiet hum of your modern world, a world built on the foundations laid by countless acts of perseverance from those who came before. Rest easy, knowing that while the human journey is complex and often arduous, the spirit of survival, of adaptation, and of resilience is an ancient, beautiful part of who we are. It's the strength that binds us to our ancestors, a gentle reminder that even in the darkest times, the light of human ingenuity always finds a way.